Hello, Tennessee Voices viewers and listeners. This is David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Director for the USA Today Network Tennessee and the Tennessean. Today, I have the pleasure of having as my guest Dan Hunter. Dan is the founder of Navorion LLC, a company focused on bringing new ideas to market. And its first venture, Workzinga, is a job search assessment and hiring platform emphasizing company culture fit. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I appreciate you having me on your show.
Absolutely. For people who aren't familiar about Workzinga, would you talk a little bit about this concept and how it came about?
Absolutely. So I was having some very early discussions early last year with my sister about COVID and remote work and the impact that was having on the workforce. And we began kind of thinking down the line, what happens after COVID with the new embracing that people have had about working from home, and what does that mean for the workforce? Is it sustainable? How are companies going to adapt? And one conversation led to another, and we kind of came up with this concept that if we're going to be moving into this new age where you could potentially be recruiting people from all over the country, and you as a job seeker may be looking for work all over the country, how do you really legitimately find businesses or candidates for jobs and really get to know them if you are quite likely not going to have a face-to-face interview? And then the conversation evolved from there that, well, how do you know anyway? Even if you do have a face-to-face conversation, how do you really know this company is the right fit for me? So over time, through some lengthy conversations with my daughter, who was a psych major at Belmont, and we discussed personality testing and thought maybe this is an opportunity to use existing science around organizational psychology and create a tool that would allow job seekers and companies to know more about the other person when you're making that really critical decision about whether to extend an offer to a candidate or to accept an offer if you're a job seeker. How do you know more? And we all know that culture is an important component of your job satisfaction, but are you really knowledgeable about it before you join a company? That's really what this was. It was just a tool to help inform that conversation and help both companies and job seekers just make better decisions.
Thank you for that. I had the pleasure of moderating a conversation with Workzinga and with some of your professionals and other business leaders, particularly about company culture. And it was really interesting to me to hear some of the challenges related to not just recruiting workers, but also retaining workers, where there might be a different expectation of what work looks like in the future. I know from my own work, we're heading 2 years into being away from the office, and we're only starting now to possibly return back. Could you tell me a little bit about your insights in terms of that retention aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's become very common now for us all to be talking about this notion of the Great Resignation, that employees are looking at their job and their career in a different light, that it's not simply enough to get a paycheck. I need to be more fulfilled. I need to have a greater sense of satisfaction. And I need to be somewhere where I really like going, because there are many opportunities out there now. And I don't have to just settle for the one that's going to give me a paycheck. I've got more choices. And I think that that's being embraced by more and more people. So, and it's two-sided. Employees are looking for this. Companies are going to have to respond to this. They're going to have to figure out, how do I deal with this new dynamic where employees are very emboldened and they're empowered to make these decisions. So I think it's an exciting opportunity to really reset. What does it mean to have a relationship between a company and an employee? What is it really about? What is the expectation? And how best can a company get what they need out of their employees while making sure that their employees are satisfied and fulfilled and have longevity? So I think that is a very important part of this conversation around the Great Resignation and this new era that we're in, where employees are in the driver's seat by and large.
It was really interesting at that panel discussion. One of the panelists said, rather than thinking about it as a great resignation, think about it as the great opportunity.
Yeah.
And whether it's the employee or the employer, I hear quite a bit, both within my company and also in other industries, about the notion of creating environments that are, expanding the employee experience. And you've mentioned a little bit about that in terms of fulfillment and satisfaction. What else are you hearing, or what else does your research show you of what makes an expanded employee experience?
Right. So we did a survey last year, about 2,500 employed and looking for employment respondents. And we learned some very interesting things. One, culture fit was a top 3 concern across the board, just over and over and over again. That's what we heard. 8 in 10 people felt like they had been in at least one situation which was a bad culture fit. That's 80%. 80% of people know that they've had a bad culture fit at some point in their career. And the results of that were also clear in this survey. Over 70% said that it affected their level of productivity, their level of creativity. Over 80% said that it affected their mental well-being. So the importance just came through in this survey over and over and over again with every question. So I think you can't overemphasize the importance of fit. It's not simply about the job that you do and the money that you're being paid. It's about the environment in which you're doing it. It's about the leader under which you're working. It's about the motivators that your company offers to you. So that's what we're hearing, is that it's a much more holistic picture now. It's not quite so narrow and focused purely on compensation. It is compensation, but it's more than that.
I know one of the issues too that we have encountered in many of these conversations is that of burnout. Because there's a time when, over the last 2 years especially, you alluded to the issue of mental health and wellness, and there's that notion of, for so long we were talking about productivity and return on investment, and
Right.
it seems now that we want great results, but at a certain point, how do employers reset so that they can get those great results, but at the same time ensure that their employees are fulfilled and are adding to that ROI.
Right. And it's critically important that businesses figure this out. They've got to get it right, because one of the cornerstone parts of business is you've got to have a workforce that does a thing, provides a service, creates a product, whatever it is. They're a necessary part of any successful business. You have to figure out, how are you going to create a workforce that is satisfied and it will sustain you. But I think there's benefit in that for the company. The greater the level of satisfaction of the job, the higher the productivity, the greater the effectiveness of your workforce, you'll get the return if you invest in these things. It won't simply be, managing your attrition. You can achieve higher results with the same workforce if you provide environments and stimuli and culture that corresponds with what people are looking for. And what they're looking for today is not what they were looking for before. You're going to have to look at things differently. And I've said over and over again, you've got to engage. You've got to talk to your workforce and find out truly, honestly, what are they looking for? And then you got to act on it. You can't just ask the question and then do nothing. We have to find out, what is it that they're seeking and how can I make it work for them so that it in turn works for me.
I think a lot about the Silicon Valley example where there was famously with Google with, you have all sorts of activities that employees can do, gym, food all the time and everything. And, the point is to stay there. And with the stay at home, many employees, whether it's those companies or other companies, are saying, I want to spend time with my kids. If you're in an area like the Bay Area where commutes can be pretty large, or even if you're talking about going from Wilson County to Nashville, that's another example of something that's a commute that's not a lot of fun. Having been in a heavy commute today from East Tennessee, how can employers, do you think, both satisfy those desires from employees, but at the same time build up what they think might be an optimal company culture? Because historically, company culture was about being in the same room together, being eye to eye, getting to know each other in a very intimate level.
And I think that basic premise is still the same, because what you're talking about are relationships. That's the key. Whether you're sitting in a room or you're working over Zoom, or you're separated by 1,000 miles or 10 feet across the room, it's all about a relationship. You have to know what your workforce is looking for. What are employees seeking? What truly motivates them? What drives them? That applies whether you're sitting in the same room or you're sitting 5 states away. So it's about investing in that relationship. And I think one of the pieces that people from the employee's perspective are learning is that I can get the same job done without a commute, without a job, without a dress code, without sitting, in traffic and dealing with all of these other things that don't have a whole lot to do with my job. I can still achieve these things by working from home. I think businesses need to think even beyond just the location of where the work is occurring, but the time in which it's occurring. I think what people are looking for is, I want not work-life balance, but rather I'm only one person. I'm a single person. I don't have all of these individual things that I want to compartmentalize anymore. I want it to be one cohesive identity. And part of it is work, and part of it is home, and part of it is friendships. And so they want work to be part of it, not a separate 8-hour component. They may want to work 2 or 3 hours in the morning and then spend an hour or two with their kids, and then on a hobby, and then spend 3 or 4 more hours working the afternoon, or whatever it may be. Obviously, that doesn't work for all jobs, and I'm not advocating that it does. But that's the kind of creativity I think companies should embrace, is thinking beyond time and attendance. Think beyond 8 hours a day. Think beyond 5 days a week. Really focus on what is the job that needs to get done. What are the goals for that job? Manage to the goal, not to the time that the person is spending. Then you're empowering that person to decide for themselves. In order to achieve this thing, I will spend 3 hours now. I'll take a break. I'll spend 2 more hours. And maybe today I spend 5 or 6 hours on it, but then tomorrow I spend 10 hours. So trust people. It's a relationship. Trust them to get the job done and let them manage their time. Those are the types of things that I think companies need to think outside the box. It's unorthodox, admittedly. It's very non-traditional, and it doesn't apply everywhere. I'm not going to advocate that it does, but that's an example of how you can think beyond the orthodox and look to what people really want, and then meet them there. And figure out, how do you make it work for you, the company, as well as for your teammates.
Thank you for that. And before we continue, I always like to ask my guests around the midway point about what they're doing for their own wellness, since we've been talking about work and life and so forth. So what are you doing? What are you reading, watching, doing to help you with your own self-care?
Right. Well, admittedly, I'm a binge watcher. So one of my kids and I will sit and binge watch a show. It almost doesn't matter what the show is, quite honestly. It's just the time away. So that's one component. Another is, I just try to take some time for me where it's quiet, whether it's going to the gym, or it maybe going for a walk, or just sitting. I try to make sure that I always have time to focus on decompressing. Because if I can spend that time decompressing and not worrying about achieving something, then when I'm out of that mode, I'm much more effective. And that's true pre-COVID and post-COVID, I'm sure. But it's definitely been true the last couple of years, is that you have to look for ways to release, because work is always intense. There's always a lot of stress there. COVID has just added to that. So I think finding ways and finding methods that allow you to release and let it go, so that when you are back at it and you are back to work, you're much more energized, and you have a clean slate. You can focus, and you're not kind of cooped up with all of your thoughts that you've had for the last 12 and 15 hours. You just kind of let it go.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I too am enjoying binging a couple of things this time around throughout the last 2 years. So let me go back and ask you a little bit about Navorion, and also your own history as an entrepreneur. What drove you into this particular field and this particular path?
Yeah. So I was with Smile Direct Club for about 5.5 years, from the very early days all the way up through April of 2020. And I was able to see it from a small, kind of small, very clustered idea, where we were still trying to figure out what the best way was to do different parts of the business, all the way through the growth. And that growth was intense. I've been in other growth mode organizations as well, and it's always the same. It's you got to go 100 miles an hour, and you got to build, build, build. I absolutely agree with that. I'm totally on board with it. We're in that mode right now. But one of the challenges you have is that in that growth, you're probably hiring people. And it can be very challenging to hire the most appropriate, best cultural fit when you're having to hire so many people so quickly. And I looked back on my time and I realized that even though we successfully hit our goals, we hit timelines and we achieved certain mile markers, that experience for the candidate was not the best. The experience for the company was not the best. We made some great hires. We made some bad hires. And there had to be a better way to do it. I'm not advocating that you do away with those intense growth mode patterns. You're going to have them, but how can you do it better? And what can we do to bring a product to market that helps those companies that are in those really intense times at least make the process a little more effective and just a better outcome for everybody? And this isn't just for those, high growth companies, it's for any company. But that's where this came from, was as we were talking about this, I thought back over all the times that I needed to hire 25 people, 50 people, 100 people sometimes in a very compressed time frame. This type of tool would have been invaluable if we'd had it, because it would have allowed me to focus on people that were the best culture fit first in order to build out the most solid team I could.
One of the things that's very interesting about this area, Middle Tennessee and Nashville, is that it's starting to be compared to Silicon Valley in a way, or at least at the very least, a tech hub for the South. Oracle is coming, Amazon is here. There's several employers. You mentioned Smile Direct, of course, and you have the presence of these really significant companies here. And how do you see them changing the landscape of the community and of work in the next several years to come?
Right. It is changing the face of Nashville. I've been here for over 25 years, and you've seen changes happen. The skyline of downtown is remarkably different, and it's really a physical manifestation of the actual change we've seen in our community. And that is, you've got very different industries coming here. They're very big. They ramp up very quickly. You're seeing a greater influence of tech. We still are a healthcare hub, but I think you're seeing more finance and more tech than what you've seen before. And you're seeing a lot of people move in here from much larger areas like New York and California, Texas. That changes our face. It brings a more metropolitan look that, people are accustomed to a certain lifestyle. They're bringing it here. You see it in the housing market. It drives up the prices of housing. And so you just see it reflected everywhere. I think it's just part of the evolution of Nashville. It's just that moment in our time where we are growing, and it's greatly influenced by all the people that are coming in here. And the different sectors that are growing here. But I think it's just a natural part of our evolution. I don't think it's not good or bad. It just is. And we need to adapt. But I think if you find the upside to it, there's a lot that Nashville can grow from here. There's a lot that we can benefit, especially when you consider the impact on higher education here. That you've got some terrific colleges here. And, if we're going to become a tech hub and we're, growing our finance sector, that's a whole new area for some of the colleges here to focus on. And, we don't have to just be for transplants. We could grow some of this intellectual powerhouse ourselves.
It's really interesting to say that I've had these conversations with some past guests about, homegrown talent. This is one of the situations when Amazon was looking for a second headquarters. The one thing that seemed to be against Nashville was having a homegrown base of talent. And lo and behold, it became a major hub, not quite the second headquarters, but, it's still a significant presence in Nashville itself. One of the things that I myself, being a transplant, I have to have that bias, but I also think that it's important to get to know the community you're in, but also that there are many community events that can unify a lot of people who are here, be it music, which is obviously Nashville's calling card, and many other things. What has kept you here in Nashville these 25 years?
I think the sense of community. It's a great place to raise kids. We have 2 kids. They're grown. I mentioned my daughter. She just graduated from Belmont. It's been the community. It's the fact that this is a terrific place for families, for young families, for families that are farther along, in their time. It's a great place for young kids to establish. I just think it offers a lot for a big cross section, and I think it well represents America. I don't think that we're too far one direction or another. That's one of the things that I've really liked about being in this area. And the second thing is the growth. It's just been in growth mode since we moved here, and that's exciting. It's cool to be part of that and to see the sports venues, to see the skyscrapers, to see the big businesses coming to town. It's a very gratifying to see Nashville kind of come into its own, and now to be, you know, a final contender for things like the RNC convention or major bowl events. That's terrific. I think it's awesome.
Well, thank you again to the Tennessee Voices audience. This is Dan Hunter, founder of Navorion, which just launched its first venture, Workzinga. Before I let you go, Dan, I always like to ask my guests to leave our audience with some words of wisdom to help them get through this challenging time.
Well, I had mentioned, you know, taking time to take care of yourself and looking for ways to decompress. I think in addition to that, I'm a big believer in, if you see something that you want to be different, you've got to be the one to go make it different. If it's something that is important to you and you want to see a change, go do it. Don't wait. And that's true whether you're going through COVID or anything else. Is if you see it, go do it.
Well, excellent advice. I want to thank you so much. May you stay well and healthy. And again, I'm grateful for taking time to be on the show today.
Great. Thanks. You too, David. I appreciate it.